I think one of the most interesting things to me about your work, and which relates to 25 Minutes Older, is the idea that you're always looking for a space in between, an intersection where opposites meet. And you're always looking for the possibilities within that space, opening up some kind of new awareness for people in the present moment often, and to illuminate something that we often neglect or take for granted. And in 25 Minutes Older, I think it exemplifies a lot of the things that you use in your work, which is the use of light, the use of technology, the use of music, the use of text. And you are able to bring all these different elements together into what could also be considered an intervention in the city, using the city itself as material. And you create these very seamless poetic works out of this real complexity of materials and the way you interweave them. And I think that it's interesting that for 25 Minutes Older, the text that you chose by a very famous Hong Kong writer, Lau Chang, is called Tet Besh, which basically is a term from stamps, where two stamps are printed together, but one is upside down. And so they're looking in opposite directions. They have a different orientation, but they're connected. And that work by Lau Chang is actually also about two people who have completely different states of mind, one looking into the past and one looking into the present. And you bring these two opposites together and put them into this moment in a tram in the city, where the city is illuminated in a way that's completely different from any way we've ever experienced. So you create, again, that, what you called an interstice, a moment in time. Before I go too much into the complexities of that, I think it would be good to actually see an example of the tram project, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about what you're doing with it.
So, yeah, let's play the video. Oh, I'm mic'd up. Okay. I don't need the mic. Is that okay? Okay, so video guys, please, can you play 25 Minutes Older? Okay.
The sky rumbles, looking up. 3 red lights blink in the sky. An airplane is flying to Hong Kong from afar.
Okay. Well, maybe can I get maybe this can be a bit more interactive. How many of you have been to 25 Minutes Older? Ah, good number of you. Very good. Thank you. So for those who have experienced the work, then this is a bit of a repetition. But for those who have not seen the work, maybe just a little bit of a background. So what you just saw projected in the interior of the tram is essentially the live images from outside of the tram through a small pinhole and through this natural optical phenomenon of camera obscura. And with camera obscura, maybe you remember from primary school a long time ago or secondary school, maybe there's an illustration of a candle light. And you have seen that the two lines converging through a point, and the image is cast at the back. That is the principle of how our eye works, how we make our world visible. And that is also how all these devices, cameras, works as well. But for this work, I'm not just playing on the technology, but more in terms of thinking of the metaphor of camera obscura, or using camera obscura as a metaphor of ways of seeing. And so that is kind of a little bit of a background of that work. And to tag what Valerie was explaining about the two characters, two main protagonists, parallel line, meeting at one single point and then vanishing away. There's a kind of complementary relationship to these two ideas. So in a nutshell, that is kind of what happens.
One of the characters is an old man, and he has fled from mainland China after the war, and he's looking for a way to stabilize his life, but he's lost also in memories. And the other character is a young lady named Ahang, and she's a young Hong Kong girl, has grown up here, and her thoughts are of the future. You know, how she can become famous, how she can illuminate her life. And there's a moment when the two encounter each other in a cinema. And that's really the key moment, but they don't really understand each other or understand each other's past or present. And Kingsley asked me to read 2 short excerpts from the book, which will give you a sense of how different their sensibilities are and their idea of existence in this moment. And both of these segments are in the script for the tram. This is the old man. Gazing at himself in the mirror, Chun Yubai becomes lost in memories. Flames engulf the international settlement. 3 bombers fly over the Huangpu River, attacking the Izumo cruiser. The troops are cut off at the Sihang warehouses. Shanghai becoming an isolated island. And on this isolated island, so many secret deaths. And in the same moment, Ahang, perhaps walking down the street, she studies herself closely in a mirror. She feels that she is more beautiful than Chan Bo-chu. There is no reason why she can't be a movie star. When she studies herself closely in the mirror, she feels that she is more beautiful than Yao Surong. There's no reason why she can't be a popular singer. So these 2 completely different lives intersecting. And we, in the tram, are given an opportunity to encounter one of them or the other, depending on which side of the tram you sit on. You'll get a headset, and on this side, you'll be seeing projections that the other side can't see. You'll be hearing only one side of the story. So that Kingsley's idea, as you told me, is that you want people to also think about what they're not hearing and what they're not seeing, as well as what they are hearing and what they are seeing. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why?
Well, I think particularly of these moments in time in Hong Kong, but in a lot of places around the world, when things are becoming very polarized, it's very often that we are very much just looking at the world from one perspective. And particularly also with social media and so on, everything is becoming filtered. And it's very difficult to be able to see another side which is not visible. And so for this work, to bring it back from the 1970s to today's Hong Kong and to present it to also an international audience, at least that is something that resonates in my mind about how we can kind of, maybe it's an open question of how do we see our positions in a very polarized society.
Okay. Actually, I'd like to jump back quite a few years, if you don't mind, and talk a little bit about your background. People know of you as a new media artist. They know that you grew up in Canada, I think from the age of 14, that you later studied in France under Alan Fletcher and were very influenced by Bourriaud and the idea of relational aesthetics, which is basically that you look at art as a social relationship, creating social connections outside of the institution. at the same time, I think, and I've said this to you, I feel that there's a lot of kind of classical philosophy in what you do, a very strong Chinese sensibility, which has a classical aspect to it. And when I asked you who your mentors were, you talked about people like Fleischer, you talked about like being influenced by Hans Haacke, the very radical artist. But then you said probably your most important influence was your grandfather, and who basically left mainland China when he was young and had to make a living selling newspapers on the streets, but was also a highly educated person, and talked to you a lot about Confucian philosophy and how his sense of the world influenced you. So I think it'd be really interesting for people to know a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think I was very lucky to have a family background like that, and it was quite discreet in a way. My grandfather, when we were very young, well, he's quite pragmatic, but he's also very romantic. For example, I still have remembrance of him bringing us on the tram, but he would be, well, kind of sharing these romanticized moments of bringing a young grandchild to the tram, but also explaining something that's very pragmatic. So he was saying that that was actually my first lessons of ROI, return on investments. And that's, well, with a coin insert onto the tram, it gets you to travel so far. But if you insert that coin into this, what is it called? Those small carousel thing outside of shops.
Oh, okay. Where you can win a prize? Ride. Like
ride, like if you go to like playground to play on a ride, you have to pay even more, but you don't get the same kind of gratitude as traveling on the tram. So he is also sharing this kind of idea of coexistence. And also in terms of the arts, well, when we were very young, he wouldn't tell us what art is, but he would always say that, well, when he's bringing us to around in his car, he will tell us, well, this is the art of driving. You know, you have to turn in a certain way that when you're sitting next to me, you don't feel like it's very uncomfortable. Or there are moments like how to hold the art of holding a chopsticks. So we had very actually rigorous training about how to hold a chopsticks, and you have to pick up marbles and time it with a clock and so on. So and then. But so he is always like telling us that, well, we have to, well, art is in a way a kind of ultimate goal, but we have to be also in the world. And so I think a lot of that really resonated with me. Yeah,
you did mention at one point that when you were 3 or 4, he would talk to you about Confucian philosophy in metaphorical terms. That was interesting. But that idea of, in Chinese we say, 出世 and 入世, which means basically being detached from the world and being engaged with the world. And in different times in the Chinese art history, artists have gone through periods when they have detached totally from the world and gone into seclusion. And then other times they have engaged politically or socially. And I think that talking about that in-between place, that's also part of what you're looking for, is the in-between place between being detached from the world and being engaged with the world. And how can you be both at the same time without being overwhelmed by either one? So I think when looking at some of your works, one often finds that you're creating a space for encounter, and that there's often a subtext which does have to do with a kind of social critique. But one thing that struck me, and we talked about this before, is, for example, with Hans Haacke, who's one artist who influenced you a lot, in his later work, he was very much engaged in institutional critiques of the museum, critiques of the government, kind of very direct attacks. But I think that what you do is you don't really critique institutions so much or governments so much, but you critique the kind of state of mind that is induced in us, and then we become sort of numb to things around us, and you're trying to open up another space for that. I think, for example, in Galaxy Express, that's very obvious. I wonder if you might want to talk a little bit about that work, which you did a few years ago. Yeah.
Good. So maybe before I talk about Galaxy Express, we can see excerpts of the work on video. So can video team play Galaxy Express? We can play it halfway. I can tell you when to stop.
A non-stop train is passing through the station. Please stand behind the yellow line.
Day 1. I still remember. You once told me that there is a metro station in Paris North, where the train also terminates, not at a place, but at a point in time. Just like our train. Is that line 7? Tonight, this train is scheduled to embark on its journey to a point in time when the sun, the earth, and the center of the galaxy are all perfectly aligned. It will pass through Sagittarius into the galactic center, 28,000 light years away. Its destination is the winter solstice of 2012. Some people once believed that this date would mark the end of time. Day 5. There are people who have boarded this train to remember, but others who have boarded only to forget. You told me the actual is only actual for one single time, at one single place. Why would anyone forsake the present to dwell in the past? Why am I here, now? Day 7. Traveling backwards in time, we begin to forget. Some people forget why they boarded in the first place. Others, like me, make voice recordings to capture the days sliding by. I want to remember, not to forget. Day 13. Passengers on the train are from all walks of life. There, I see the scientists. They believe they can unlock the secrets of the universe by understanding time. And there, the industrialists. They believe they can find new ways of profit-making by exploiting the unexploited. And there, the activists. They believe they can save the future by urging people to live green. Sometimes, in the distance, I can hear babies crying and mothers singing lullabies. It makes me think of that time, in the past, when so many families crossed the oceans to find new homes. I was so young then.
Okay. All right. So yeah, you may have got a sense of the work. So it's a video installation of 5 screens and 5 projections. So you have a sense of traveling through time in this train compartments. The projectors are casting light on the floor, so it seems like light is radiating through the windows. In terms of the story, for the last phrase you heard, it's about exile. It's about people who is escaping from wherever they are they have a reason of traveling back in time in search of something that is lost. It's quite fragmented. You're told by this young girl's voice, and she is recording her encounters on this train every day as a way to remember, because memories are lost day by day. So after 30 days, she would be returned to a point in time in the past. And with this kind of fragmented narration, there's in a way a lot of quite imminent issues that it brought up. There's about migration, there's about also food issues, but most of all, it's about remembering and time. But it's very flowed in a way, the work. It's very open form.
Well, I think it's an interesting point that you often write the text yourself for your works.
For this one,
Yeah,
yes,
this
but for 25 minutes older.
No, of course not.
Yeah,
But there are other cases where you have, and often you will compose music yourself. And this work, I think, is one of your most topical, in the sense that at the time it seemed to be addressing a lot of the conflict, not only Hong Kong within itself, but also Hong Kong and mainland China. Some of the issues of the influx of visitors from mainland China and the kind of impact they bring. And you talk about people attempting to take some kind of advantage or find some kind of advantage in life, but actually in the end creating disadvantage. You talk about smuggling, milk powder, which probably most of you don't know, but that was a huge issue in Hong Kong, where people would come in from the mainland and buy milk powder in huge quantities and bring it back to China, because the milk powder in China was tainted. And this created a dearth of powder here. So there's a lot of subtext to his work. And I think that when you begin to investigate it, the beautiful poetic simplicity of it, behind that, there's a great deal of this kind of critique and complexity, but again, about how we perceive things, how we perceive what's important, how we lose things. So I think that's an interesting. Do you have any more comment about that?
Yeah, I think in terms of this kind of storytelling, I don't want to be too explicit. And I do think reserving a kind of space is very important. And so maybe I just want to maybe at this point read a quote that really stays with me for a long time, and about this way of storytelling, and it's by the late John Berger in his book Bento's Sketchbook. So he talks about what he thinks about what is needed in storytelling today, and he talks about, for him, there are two kinds of storytelling: those that treat the invisible and the hidden, and those that expose and offer the revealed. What I call, in my very own special and physical sense of the terms, the introvert category and the extrovert one. Which of the two is likely to be more adapted to, more transient about what is happening in the world today? I believe the first. Because its stories remain unfinished, because they involve sharing, because in their telling, a body refers as much to a body of people as to an individual. Because for them, mystery is not something that is to be solved, but to be carried. Because although they may deal with sudden violence or loss or anger, they are long-sighted. And above all, their protagonists are not performers, but survivors.
It's interesting. I think that we are open. Anytime you have a comment or a question, please feel free to do that. I think a structure of a talk like this can be challenging because it's one artist. There's a lot to look at, a lot to say. And I think that with Kingsley, again, because his work is very ephemeral, is very poetic, there's a kind of delicacy about it which requires a little bit more investigation. So perhaps maybe what we can do first is look at some of the other videos of some of your other works, and then we can go through and talk about the commonalities and the differences between them. Would that be okay?
Good. So, since we are in this kind of train theme, I will play you another work with the train. Please, can we go to the moon? So yeah, very different kind of storytelling here. So the last work, Galaxy Express, is a text that I written, but this one it's written by 10 children of age of 10. So over a summer, we work over many workshops with these students. We ask them to imagine if you have to build 5 cities, 5 towns between the 5 natural elements, how would you build them? And what kind of story can you tell us with these 5 towns? So they imagine between the water and wood, so water wood city, what they do to kind of bring water to become wood, wood to become fire, fire to become earth, earth to become metal, metal to come back to water. So it's a little bit, I think, kind of like Carvino's Invisible Cities in a way, where it seems to be very abstract. but it's very telling. The stories by children, and there's a lot of things we can decode about our contemporary time. And the site, it's rather special. This is in Kowloon Sai in Hong Kong, called Doran Valley Park. It looks like quite a beautiful park, but it's actually landfills. And so under this greenery, the irony of all the human creations beneath. And we deliberately did this project under the full moon during the Moon Festival. So the Moon Festival, for centuries in this region, is like Thanksgiving. It's a time where we pay tribute to nature, to thank the year of harvest and the time when people store the harvest and for the bitter cold winter. So, of course, today, especially the younger generations, it's not so easy to connect to the old idea of the Moon Festival anymore. And so this is a kind of open dialogue with the children, but also the large number of public at the park. And besides the storytelling, we had these so-called Lantern riddles. So in the festival, very often there's these quite sometimes direct questions, but we want it to be more rhetorical and abstract. There's no model answers. So as you saw, the answer to it is through an experience. So at every one town, you have a kind of sensory experience of how the natural elements turn through this cycle, illustrated by this miniature train, and with a small camera mounted on at the front, and it's got live projected at the park. Okay.
I think that's an example of your version of relational aesthetics. Creating almost a celebratory moment for people, which has occurred in other cases as well. But let's look at the next.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe let's look at Moon Gate.
大概刚刚100公里而已，100个出头哈。那我们当初发现维他命在100年前，他发现有个名词叫做维他命的时候，其实大家也搞不懂是什么东西。那可是到了现在呢，我们知道说维他命有 A、D、E、K， 有脂溶性的、水溶性的，有 B1、B2、B6、B12，我们甚至于知道什么东西对我们什么好，对不对？是。好了。可是多糖体是大概近20-30年前发现的，新的一个名词，可是它会对于未来它是一个很重要的营养元素。为什么哈？因为我们的中药草里面，
在这个不可显啊 ，often balance。sulla lac
Okay, so maybe we can stop here. Okay, so this work titled Moon Gate, and the Chinese title is Han, or xian in Mandarin or Cantonese in Han, which is of a gate. If you look at the composition of the word in Chinese, it's of a gate outside and a moon inside. And this character in Chinese, it means leisure. So it's a beautiful moment, I feel. It's in the old times, that character is interchangeable of another, which is of a gate outside and a sun inside. And that is the character for space, or sometimes in Japanese, ma, the idea. So, I feel it's incredible philosophy behind these words of the moments when there is a small gap of an opening and light penetrating through that small gap into an interior and informs the idea of space. And when moonlight penetrates through this gap into an interior, when we're under this stream of lights from the moon, it's leisure. So that is a bit of a background of the title. What you saw here, it's a little bit abstract to understand, but it's a site-specific work. And what you saw was at the Museum of Contemporary Arts in Taipei, and the window seems to be blocked. And it seems like light is streaming through the window into the interior. It's actually computer controlled, the lights you saw. And in the lights, you would recognize a tree, branch, and leaves seems to be moving according to the wind. But in fact, it's not the wind, it's the radio tuning. So there's a small radio in the space. When you hear about the static, you thought it may be the wind, but it's actually radio shifting different frequencies, shifting different programs. And in that kind of state of mind, how do we listen to the world that is outside that window? And it's a very discrete work again, but with the clipping, there's a lot of rather difficult issues that it deals with. For example, the last song you heard, it's by the indigenous tribes in Taiwan, and there's a lot of other references which is rather difficult to bear. But the idea is, how do we kind of listen to the world through the wind, and have another kind of sensitivity of receiving beyond just confrontations.
I think it's interesting. The original place where that work was showed was in downtown Hong Kong, a small gallery off a very busy street. And so you're walking on a very hot day down this busy street with the traffic blaring and the exhaust in your nose, and you walk into this small gallery and suddenly it's transformed into moonlight and this tree moving on the floor. And it's actually quite shocking when that happens. And I think that your ability to create this kind of atmosphere in a white cube situation, and all the technology that goes into creating this very simple moment, I think is very distinctive in your work. And I actually want to talk a little bit about when you first started studying computer science. It was actually in high school. And you went to a special high school in Toronto, and it was very heavily into computer as a science and in media studies. But conversely, with the arts as well, but it seemed like your focus was more on that. But conversely, you said that's when you decided to be an artist. And one thing I thought was quite funny is he said that was a very rational decision. For you, becoming an artist was a very rational idea, whereas most people would think, well, this is a big risk I'm taking, or I won't be considered a normal part of society. But for you, it seemed like the most rational and pragmatic thing to do. Can you talk a little bit about that, why you've thought that?
Yeah, so again, I think this goes back to my grandfather and how, in a way, arts for him, and I think I got that from him, is that it's about learning how to be a human being, and there's such a wealth of knowledge and a way of understanding the world and sensitivities that is very different and difficult in other subjects. So I think learning to be a human being is a kind of lifetime endeavor. And so in a way, it's kind of pragmatic. What you would try to go into, if you think of going to schools, and it's how to learn to be a human being in a way. So after high school, I decided to go into the arts and study the arts and all the way through as a way of kind of learning how to be a being. And this kind of resonates to Fu Lei, who has Fu Chong is the famous pianist, and there's always this line, a very famous line between this father and the son, that before becoming a pianist, you have to learn to be a musician. Before learning to become a musician, you have to learn to become an artist. And before learning to be an artist, you have to learn to be a human being. And I think that kind of idea resonates a lot to me.
It's interesting also, something you've told me is that for you, it's really important to be authentic to your time. So that means that for you, it's important to use contemporary language, which also includes technology, because that is the language of the time. So that's why if we look more deeply into what you do and how you create your effects, it's extremely complicated. You know, there's all kinds of computer programming involved, and you often use music, for example, to trigger actions, you know, with video or with kinetic movements. And that also that interstice between the incredible precision with which you must plan and program everything, and then always allowing a quality of randomness in the work. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting point, and also like the camera obscura, and if you have the chance to go on 25 minutes older, well, one of the beauty of the work is it's unpredictable. There's no two moments the same. And in a gray day like this, it will be more abstract, it will be a bit more moody, but bright day is very different, perspective twisting in space, and at night it's like an abstract film of these abstract lights floating. So there's, I feel, again, this coexistence of plan and thoughts, but there's also a kind of openness to collaborate in a way with all these things that is there already. So in a way, it's also like a dialogue, and I don't see it's always one person's creation. It's myself with a lot of people also working on the project, but also other things like nature and time and weather. They are also key key participating members of the work. So yeah, it's technology empowers a lot of these opportunities, but I'm very much aware that we are also losing our senses because of technologies, and because we are always chasing the latest things. Well, not all of us, but a lot of people are. Well, I do have iPhone 6 here too, and with higher definition and augmented and virtual reality and so on. But something like the camera obscura, this is centuries old discoveries used by Renaissance painters, and in China it dates back to Mozi, and it's something that is so rooted to human culture in a way. But it's still like high tech in a way, a high tech discovery. But that was also still today it fascinates a lot of passengers as well on board. So yeah, for me, I'm quite conscious not to chase the latest technologies per se, and also to be aware that yeah, we are also losing our senses because of the sensorial bombardments that is also attached to all these technologies.
So the desensitization, really, of contemporary life. It's interesting how, for those of you who haven't experienced the tram ride yet, when you first get to the waiting area, you'll be offered tea. And this tea is rice tea that's been made out of rice that's been grown in Hong Kong, in the New Territories. The rice paddies are disappearing rapidly, as you can imagine, due to development. And then they're roasted by a local lady who was introduced to Kingsley by another artist, who is also very much involved in this kind of farm movement among artists in Hong Kong. That's a part of this concept of relational aesthetics, but their practice is actually to go in and learn about the land and to become farmers, and to introduce that food back into people's daily lives. So this tram project extends out, constantly. I think that's another aspect of your work, is that you're there as the audience experiencing this work, but if you begin to trace the different filaments of experience that went into creating it, it leads you in many different directions. And I find that very unique in your work. Shall we look at another?
Yeah, okay. So maybe we can look at one more video, Horizon.
我们有机会先挑选自己最想要的课程，但是当我们一开始获得了不是最想要的时候，要怎么样去接受第二？
When you share the water, it's not just about sharing the water, but it's about exchanging between you and the other person. And you learn how to give and take, to have an equal horizon, to have an equal share, because we are all equal.
可能透過我哋唔同一啲想去改變呢個社會嘅 change makers 嘅努力，咁就可以將呢一啲嘅原本唔平均嘅資源就可以 level off 翻。
Okay, we can end here. Thank you. Yeah, so this project called Horizon, it's a project for Make a Difference, which is an organization very active in social innovation through the arts in Hong Kong. And every year they have a very big flagship forum where 1,500 participants from all over Asia, they come to Hong Kong for this forum. So it's in a way a little bit the format, to be very simple, it's a bit like TED, but it's very different. It's very often about how to drive a holistic, aesthetic experience through a 3 days conference. Of course, with world-leading speakers, but also with a lot of very participatory events. And for that event, for that forum that year, so the idea was to create this installation with one horizon, with all these recycled bottles you saw. That one line connected actually beneath the table. So wherever you take the water from that sculptures, that level of water will always be constant. And the invitation to all the participants was that, well, through this event, everyone was given a glass as a souvenir, but they are encouraged when they meet one new friend, they are to make a horizon together. And we invite 1,500 people to make one horizon. So it's a kind of rhetorical question. And then to engage that sense of how the delicacy of holding that water, but also to question what does it mean to be equal. And so it kind of using that as a method to fill in the gaps of the whole conference. And yeah, something like that.
I wonder if we could look at one more video. I think we have time, which would be Record Light.
Record Light.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't have.
Oh, you don't have
video.
that.
But
Sorry.
I have this picture there.
Okay, if we could show that.
But maybe we can just go to the next slide. Okay, this one. Yeah, let's hold it here.
I think in a way this work is related to the work we just saw, even though aesthetically, stylistically, they look completely different. But what you're talking about in the Horizon Line one is really about recognizing the presence of another person, and not only their presence, but how their action speaks to you in a way that you would not have necessarily paid attention to before. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about the concept of this piece. It's too bad we don't have the video, but I think you can still get some sense.
Okay. So yeah, sorry, we don't have the video of this work. So it's called Record Lights with also the coordinates of a location. And it's essentially for this work, it looks like a gramophone. But this special gramophone, there is a disc, and the disc records the flashing of lights from the Hong Kong peak. And so it's something that is always not seen, but it's there every single night, 365 days a year. If you look out to the Hong Kong harbor, under all these spectacles of light, above all these spectacles of lights, there are these very discrete moments of tourists taking pictures.
It's the flash from the camera.
From the flash, camera flash. But for me, that is so much more meaningful than the Symphony of Lights, who you might have seen in Hong Kong. But it's so interesting that every single light, although it's very, it seems like it's momentary and it's very discrete, but it's a capture of a memory of oneself. And so many people have had different stories at that single point. And so, this work in a way is to capture these lights on a gramophone, on a disc, and it's being played back as music. And we have also other renditions of the work, but
and then the projection on a screen. So you actually see the flashing of the lights. So I think that the technology that went into this is incredible, that he's able to actually inscribe the flashing of lights onto a gramophone record, which is played on an analog record player, and that is actually projected onto a screen in a kind of a living room setting. It's a really remarkable piece. And I think that it also touches on something that, again, is very present in your work. And this is the idea of what some philosophers have called the nostalgia for the present, a nostalgia for the present moment, where you pause and you realize that you're experiencing this experience, and it can instill in you a kind of longing. And I think Kingsley, his work really captures that. When I went on the tram project the first time last year, I remembered a poem by a 17th century Japanese poet named Basho, a haiku poet. And I'm just going to speak it out here because I think it encapsulates a lot of the feeling I get from your work. And it's called When in Kyoto. It's even when in Kyoto, when I hear the cuckoo's cry, I long for Kyoto. So that sense of being in the moment, something happens. A cuckoo's cry is like music. Suddenly you long for this moment even while you're living it. So I think that yeah, I want to thank you for giving me that experience often when I see your work. So I think we could probably
go to questions.
you go to, and open it up to any questions for Kingsley or comments, sharing.
The mic.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Really enjoyed it. I just want to ask Kingsley, in the process of conceptualization and in the process of production and post-production, what would that be your emotional changes for you in these three stages? How the work is affecting you emotionally?
Yeah, that's very good and difficult to answer a question. But it is, I think it's very difficult to stay calm all the time. And for example, for the 25 minutes older project, like we have been in the depot until 4 a.m., 5 a.m. for many nights, and there are all these technical things we have to handle, and the transport department and the different bureaucracy that we have to go through, and getting the registered structural engineers approval and this and that. But the production phase can be extremely frustrating, and but yeah, it's. I feel, especially in a project of that scale, I'm also collaborating with a lot of people, and to be able to stay calm, it's a learning process, and so far it's okay, and but it is a lot of the time it's difficult to kind of have that kind of state of mind under tight pressures, and a lot of things that can go wrong, and yeah, I don't know if I answer your question. Okay. Anyone else? Maybe the mic. Sorry.
You see the world in reverse, and beyond this technical aspect, is there for you any signification to that? Seeing the Hong Kong bustling action in reverse.
Yes, absolutely. I think. Yeah, I don't just get fascinated by the technologies, but for me, it's like Marshall McLuhan's medium is the message, and the medium I'm using in very much is intricate to the body of positions that the work is trying to bring into. So. There's a lot, but then at the same time, I think it's important to be open and to see the world upside down as a metaphor of seeing. I think it brings a lot of very complex interpretations, especially in the time today. And so, yeah, I think I wouldn't position just one way of looking at this, but it opens up a lot of conversations.
What we see is not what we are supposed to see. Or something.
It could be, and some people, when they recognize about this, and also rethink about, well, our retina receives the world upside down, but sometimes you would be wondering, are we really looking at the right side up every single moment? Because we are so in looking at one side of the story, which is what is being presented to us. And it's very difficult for us to contemplate on another side. So in a way, the way how we lay out this tram with the this seating plan, one opposite one another, and to present two distinctive, different storyline, one of Ahang, one of Chen Yubai. It's also to reiterate this message. Could be, absolutely.
Or maybe doubting your singular experience of the reality. I think the other thing about the camera obscura projections is that they're so ephemeral. They're almost like you're seeing the soul of the city, the spirit of the city. And it's so thin, it's so insubstantial. And that also, I think, is a quality of experience that you don't normally think about. Yeah.
Good. Anyone else? Yes.
Hello. I like to thank the artists to share this work with us, especially in this period of so-called Hong Kong Art Week. And I participated last night, and it was very strange to me because I feel like my companies, those persons in the tram with me, we're all moving from Art Basel to that meeting point, that we are all our people. To my personal experience, I come to Hong Kong only once per year. It's for our fair, actually. So I actually come, it's been 5 years, I come every time, but I don't actually see Hong Kong. I see Hong Kong in our fair, actually. And I meet, and the restaurant or the places I go is like, it's like Hong Kong is like, it's not Hong Kong in common sense. It's a Hong Kong for our people, if you allow me to say that. And yesterday, I started to experience your work actually from the moment that I leave. I left this art fair because I couldn't get a cab to go to the meeting point, so I have to force myself to walk. I was so afraid to get lost because, it's very difficult to go through all these towers. And then there was a street that I really actually see the real Hong Kong people sitting in the snacks and having their quick dinner, and I was very thirsty, so I bought from a kiosk to get a bottle of water. That was my first time to see Hong Kong, I'm sorry to say, even though it's been 5 years that I come here. And I remember there was a person remind us to compare the speed. When I first stepped in the bus, in the tram, he said that try to calm yourself down and to feel the pace, the slow pace in such a fast-paced city. And there was a moment that, the magic started. And when we all go up and we see Hong Kong, the past and the future, everything. But then another magic happened when I get off the train, when I have to go back to my hotel. And I feel like, it's very hard to describe. It's like, I wonder, because I'm not an artist, I was there only to receive what your words wants me to experience. The curator said the state of mind, so I do experience that state of mind, but it's extended when the work finished. When I was on my way to go back to the hotel, I actually started to think that as an artist, if you, Kingsley, how do you look at Hong Kong nowadays, especially in this art event, in the Art Basel coming? Because I am saying this is that I feel like the art in, especially this word, is narrated by the foreign galleries, foreign, characters here. So what's the local art? I mean, it's like, I don't see, every year I come here, I see art, but I don't see Hong Kong. I see, I hope, how you look at Hong Kong during this week as an
I think
artist.
this is a very good observation, and thank you very much for your question. And absolutely, I think this is the really key intentions of the project commissioned by Art Basel, and also thank MGM Arts and Culture for all their support in the project. And with this opportunity, we are able to extend this well, this experience of the art within the convention center, but to extend it to the city. And this event is free for all, and we have had a really, really good, well-received feedback from the audience, and the audience is very mixed. Like we have tram fans, we have camera fans, we have literature fans, we have people who just saw the tram and just really want to get onto it, and we have children, we have older people, we have all kinds of people interested in the project, which in a way, I think this is, when I'm working with the Art Basel team, I can feel that is also another side of things that they want to extend even more. And this is a bit like I guess, a 1.0 kind of a trial, that for this time we are staging this really large-scale public events for the city. And if this is well received, and I can imagine there can be much more of this type of encounters to happen in the years to come. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's so much to see in the city, and it's of course Art Basel in Hong Kong. It's a great platform to see international arts. So many things coming into Hong Kong, but at the same time, there are all these opportunities to also coexist in seeing the city in a new light.
I just want to add, I was at a gallery the other day and I ran into a very well-known Hong Kong artist, and he said, "Oh, you're getting ready for the crazy week?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I'm going to Thailand." Going to Thailand for the week. Because every other year I just go away. So I think that it is a problematic relationship, and I think that it's great that you recognize the pleasure of connecting with the city in an authentic way. Because of course there's lots of exhibitions at local galleries, and there's events, and there's this and there's that. But that ability to just calm down, and experience what this place is. I think that also relates to, you still will hear people saying, "Oh, isn't Hong Kong a cultural desert?" I mean, how many years are we going to hear that? That also has to do with the fact that when people come, it tends to be very specifically for this kind of experience. And what's the vehicle to access what goes on outside? So I think that's another way of describing Kingsley's work always, is he creates a vehicle for us to experience something, and often experiencing it by needing to pause and needing to be attentive. And as we know, that relates to so many philosophies, Zen, Taoism, Confucianism, or whatever, but in a very contemporary context, those things never become irrelevant. So.
Good. Any other questions? Can it be a bit more intimate, as we don't have a lot of people?
Well, actually, it's a very personal feeling. It's like looking at your work is like reading poetry. And knowing the process of conceptualization and production, there's a long process of purification to make it so succinct and yet very moving. And as an audience, I really enjoy it, and because it's like reading a very good poetry, like the Basel poem. But afterwards, that feeling resonates.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to thank you again.
Thank you very much.
I guess if no other comments or questions, if you want to just come up and chat with Kingsley, that'd be awesome. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming.
So yeah, I want to thank all of you for coming once again. Thank you. And one more thing to thank, Art Basel for this opportunity, and to thank MGM Arts and Culture for supporting the project. Thank you. Well, also a lot of other partners as well. Osage Arts Foundation and the Pond and the Tramways. It's a lot of people behind the back to make this happen. Thank you. Oh, right. So If you still want to see the work, there is a booth outside, outside Hall 3C, I think. Hall 3C, there is 25 minutes older booth. You can book your ticket there as well. And please just imagine the work as you like. It's very open. And but be also quite clear that the work is dependent on the weather and time of the day. So the side of the tram. So think about what you want to get out of the work. Like if you want to see really bright images, then try to wait until you have the bright sunlight. But if you want something quite abstract and sappier and moody, maybe today is also a good day to go.